Daniel Kalubi. I don't know what the T is, but he goes by Dan. Dan or Daniel? Dan Works, okay. He is a development officer in the housing division of the City of Cincinnati's Department of Community and Economic Development. So you heard from the zoning manager before, so now we'll kind of do the flip side here. In his nearly 8 years with the city, he's worked in a variety of affordable housing projects and initiatives ranging from single-family new builds to multifamily. And I know most of us are in housing in one form or another with your organization, so I think this will be good to hear from him. He has been part of the city's lead grant team since 2011. He received his undergraduate degree from Miami and completed his graduate work at St. Louis University. So I invited Dan to speak about the city's HUD grant for the lead abatement program.
I'm super long-winded, so I left it to 9 slides. So hopefully that will get us. I'm being told that I'm what's keeping you guys from lunch. So, so just to start, there are actually 3 other folks that work on this program on a more full-time basis, but they're all out of town. So I was the next man up on the totem pole. So I'll try to do my best to answer your questions.
Who's the other 2 people?
So the other 3 people, Aisha Tazila, she's the brains behind all of this. And then Cynthia McCarthy with the health department. And then back in our office, Lawrence Taylor, and he's just the day-to-day project manager. So there's a big team of us, but as you'll see, it's a great program, and we hope that the CDCs take advantage of it. So just as an overview, how many of you guys are familiar with lead, just to begin with? Cincinnati, as you know, is an old city, and we have really old housing stock. We don't have the advantage of being, in Indianapolis or Columbus, where everything is post-war and boring. We have the distinct advantage of having a really great old housing. The bad part about that is that because it's old, it tends to have a lot of lead. And as you know, if you tend to live in really, really old housing, those tend to be the communities that we're doing the most work in. So you've got vulnerable populations living in housing that's got lead. And so for the last, since 2008, I believe, the city of Cincinnati has always had a lead program. And part of that is that we would like to reduce the amount of kids, being exposed to lead just because of the long-term effects. I'm sure you guys have heard about what's going on in Flint, obviously. And the reason that that's such a big deal is because you've got a bunch of kids that are lead poisoned, and the long-term effects of that in terms of education and whatnot are pretty terrible. So we as a city have always tried to be proactive to manage that. So we applied for and won a $3.4 million grant for lead hazard reduction. Okay. So as I mentioned, 88% of the housing stock in Cincinnati is at risk, and it's a toxin. You guys know all that. But the city of Cincinnati ranks second behind Cleveland in the state for having the highest incidences of childhood lead poisoning. So it's with that in mind that our department and the health department are both doing a combined program. In years past, we've done separate programs, but we're combining them this year in the hopes of kind of killing 2 birds with one stone, if you will. So examples of lead. There's one picture that's not showing up there, but these are all super familiar images to you if you guys have ever done rehabs. I'm seeing Win here, I'm seeing Presso over here. You guys are all familiar with these things. So anytime you see flaking paint or just any areas that are heavy traffic like stairs or doors and windows where there's friction, anytime that you've got lead elements on a home like that, when that dust becomes activated and gets in places that kids are around, it's always bad news. So our hope is that we can use these funds to go into homes to mitigate some of these issues and make them lead safe. Oh, I don't know why it did that. So that's what the alligator flaking paint looks like.
And that's a sign of lead.
Yeah, and so actually, when these paints were, back in the day, when a lot of exterior paints, they were actually designed to chalk when it rained, just to kind of maintain their integrity. But when that paint, after several years of chalking, it gets into the soil around the house and all that, so that's never good. And I'll talk about kind of some of the mitigation, some of the work that we do to take care of that. Yeah, go ahead.
You said you had the $3.4 million. Is that for you guys to do it, or can the CDCs apply for it?
So I've got a frequently asked questions slide.
Oh.
That's like I said, I'm long-winded, so I can sit up here and talk. I've already spent way too much time on the first 6 slides.
I'll wait.
So just some background. In 2008 to 2010, and I came on at the tail end of 2010. The city got $3 million. Our target unit production was 240 units, and we ended up doing 279 units. Okay, so these are all really good numbers, but I just want to point out that $3 million is only going to get us 279 units. So that goes to say that what we hope is that you guys can leverage these funds to have as much impact as possible. Because like I said, $3 million sounds like a lot, but at the end of the day, when you're dealing with really old housing that needs a lot of work, it doesn't stretch as far as we'd like to. But it's still 279 units that are lead safe, which is great. So over the last, so we've done about 600 or so units, a little less than 600 units during those time periods. So the current lead grant, so as we mentioned, it's $3.4 million. It's citywide eligibility. In years past, we had certain neighborhoods that we worked in, and the way that we decided on what neighborhoods we work in is based on the incidences of child lead poisoning. So if a child went to the doctor and ended up that they had a high lead levels, then we just looked at those stats, layered it over our neighborhoods, and we decided that we were going to work in certain neighborhoods. This year, we're citywide, so any CDC anywhere will have access to that. There's a 80% AMI limit. That's that's the top end of, and that makes sense. This is the world that we operate in. So there's an affordability component. We have a 225 unit target, and I'm going to take a step back real quick. So the last several years we've got $3 million. This year we have $3.4 million. That $400,000 is a Healthy Homes component. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Healthy Homes component, but essentially, if you've got a older housing stock, and let's say that you have lead issues on the inside, but if those lead issues are caused by a damaged roof that's allowing water intrusion, that is deteriorating paint, that is then flaking, etc., then it makes no sense to do anything with the paint on the inside unless we fix the roof. So that $400,000 is for the Healthy Home component. So on all these houses, when we go in, we're obviously going to be looking at the lead issues, but we're going to be looking at other issues that are causing that. And in addition to that, Healthy Homes also includes things like asthma and all that type of stuff. So so those funds will be used to mitigate some of that. As far as our unit average for a single family home, we like to stay around the $10,000 average per house. Okay, for a multi-unit property, 7,000, and we found that that is about the average. You know, when you factor in economies of scale and getting one contractor to do multiple units, $7,000 is about the limit. HUD gives us the ability to do 10% of the units as vacant units. So that means that you can do, let's say the CDC owns a property and they want to get it renovated, but there's nobody living in the property, then HUD allows us to have 10% of our units be vacant, okay? So this is where we get to the frequently asked questions. Okay, so how does the CDC get access to lead grant funds? What we're doing this year is that we're going to have an online application. It's not done yet because we still haven't quite signed off on the grant, but there will be an online application, and CDCs can apply for funds for housing. And obviously, you guys work in this world. Site control is important. So you have to ask for. If you're asking for funds, hopefully it's sites that you control, that you're going to rehabilitate and and then sell. Is there a max amount for units that CDCs can apply for? We would like to keep it to 5 to 10 units. So if you guys are have 5 to 10 units, maybe you have 7, and you are putting together a scope of work to do rehabilitation on it, come to us, okay? And if there's lead work to be done, we would like to work with you. Can CDCs use their own contractors to do lead grant related work? CDCs cannot use their own contractors. However, we will have an RFP process every year. And if you have a contractor in mind that you would like to do your lead work, they can, they can do 2 things. They can go through part of the lead grant. The goal is to have more lead abatement licensed contractors in the area to begin with. So we could pay for some of their training. And then once they are licensed, then they can apply to be in the RFP program, or in the lead grant program. And then if they get through that, then you can work with them. But we do have a pool. Go ahead.
What if they're licensed?
If they're licensed, then they need to go through the RFP process.
So when it says about the number of CDCs, the units they can apply for, let's say in a neighborhood that the units are individually owned by owner occupants, but we wanted to pool all of those individuals and apply as the CDC, even though we as an organization don't control those sites. Is that okay, or do they individually have to apply?
No, we've done that in the past with Price Hill Will.
Okay.
They just, you guys are in your neighborhoods every day, and your residents maybe feel more at ease with you, working through you. So we can, definitely do an allotment that we say, hey, you guys have to go out and find, 7 single-family homeowners, and then, they can do that.
And then the money would go through us to go to them, or does we need to finance it, or?
No. So it would. I mean, it's semantics, but the money would go. I guess it would technically go through you to the contractor, okay. And then. So, very good question. And actually, while we're on the subject, the other piece that's not in here is that, in an effort to maintain affordability and to avoid people, flipping a house or whatnot, we have a 3-year restrictive covenant on each property. So, you as a CDC, if you guys get lead grant funds from us, you put them into a house, you will sign a restrictive covenant saying that we will, once this house is sold, to somebody who's 80% AMI, they have to be in it for 3 years at minimum, or if they don't fulfill the restrictive covenant, then they owe us the funds back. So we do that for a couple reasons, but one of the reasons is to maintain affordability and to avoid people coming in, doing a bunch of lead work and then selling their house and getting the benefits of that.
And that would work with the housing down payment program
dollars that the CDC can offer, up to $5,000 for low to moderate income buyer on a house, a CDC renovated, that they could come, they have, I think it's maybe, is it 3 to 5 or 5 years, Stephen? There's a restrictive covenant.
5
It's 5, so very similar, so probably programs sort of work together.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So, you say the 5 to 10 units for the CDC, but is there any flexibility around that? And I'm only asking because, so you're saying 50,000 to make 100,000 per CDC. What I heard was the average homeowner to get this work done is around $5,000. That's the average. But the closer your home is to the street, the cheaper it'll be. So if we're able to leverage that. Am I totally off base here?
This is paint only, right?
Oh, this is paint? Oh,
No.
any lead, the pipe, does this count for the pipe?
So I'm not, so this is where me being the next man up, I don't think that it does involve that, but I think that, we have been in conversations with Waterworks to see if we can address some of that.
Okay.
So I will confirm, and I'll communicate that with Denise, and then she'll tell you guys.
That's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry if I missed this in the different connections that we're making, but, so if the CDC worked with a group of individual homeowners in the neighborhood, how would that 3-year minimum stay be handled? I mean, would it be on, I mean, who would, I guess who would oversee that, or who would the onus be on?
So, yeah, so whenever we do this program, what we do is we send out a yearly residence, like just a confirmation that you still live there. So the onus would be on us, but if they go to sell their home, it's going to come up when they do a title search and look for any liens, because we're going to have that restrictive covenant on that property.
Okay, so the CDC at that point would be out of the.
Yeah, you guys would be out of it. If it's already an owner-occupied thing, they just let them, I mean, and if you have 12 homeowners that you know, hey, we need lead work, but we feel comfortable working with you, then perfect, bring them to us, we'll take them, But once they agree to the scope of work to be done on their house and the amount, then they'll sign the restrictive covenant, and that will be what is recorded. So if they go to sell, then it'll come up.
And that's between them, it comes between
Yeah,
the city.
the city and yeah, exactly. So just real quick, some of the things that we do. So first of all, when a house will come to us, obviously we'll do income verification just to make sure that that the homeowner is eligible. In the CDC's case, if it's a vacant unit, then that'll be on the back end when you guys are going to sell it to an income qualified buyer. But we'll do the income qualification, and then we'll do a paint inspection and a risk assessment, and that will tell us basically these are the lead issues on the house, and from that we'll be able to write the scope of services that we'll do. So just to give an example of some of the scope of services, as I mentioned, about the soil on the outside, if we test the soil and we find that it's high, especially if it's areas where kids are playing or right around the edges of the house, then we'll remove. I think it's. I want to say it's like 6 to 8 inches of soil, and we'll replace it, or we'll put mulch over it just to provide extra distance between the lead and the surface. If there's exterior paint that's flaking, obviously, then we'll stabilize. So the contractors they're licensed, so they'll go through, they'll scrape and they'll stabilize the paint on the outside. Now, just real quick, if lead paint is intact, then obviously it's not a hazard. But it's when it stops being intact that it becomes a hazard. So basically, once we have this inspection, we'll go through all the surfaces of the house that have tested positive for lead, and if those surfaces are in poor condition, then they will be addressed. So a lot of times you have baseboards that have plenty of lead. Bathrooms tend to have a lot of lead paint in there. So we'll go through surface by surface, room by room, and we'll address whatever issues need to be addressed based on the condition of the paint. Sometimes we just replace things, like if you've got a door that's old but it's full of lead paint, we'll just we'll replace the door. If your windows have lead paint and they're operable, a lot of times we'll replace the windows. So what we don't want, I mean, people tend to think of this as just like a window replacement program, just because that's what gets done a lot. But a lot of the lead that gets into the house, and unfortunately, comes from windows. So we'll do things like that. So stabilizing paint, replacing windows, replacing baseboards, replacing any component of a house that is leaded that can cause issues. So high traffic areas, porches, in multifamily properties, the hallways tend to have a lot of lead paint. So we'll stabilize all those common areas, and then we'll do the different components in each individual unit. So it's pretty comprehensive. So if you guys are rehabbing houses that may have lead paint, come to us, get this money, okay? Refer the neighbors, okay? If you've got one house that's got lead paint and it's built in the same year as the 2 or 3 houses next to it, tell them to come to us as well. So, and hopefully we can knock it down accordingly.
So just a question, outside of that, whenever you guys are doing fixes on the building, do people stay in the house or are they rehoused?
Very good question. I'm glad you asked. So no, obviously when there's lead work going on, the individuals have to relocate. Okay. So an area that I'm not quite 1,000% sure on, but I will talk to Denise about. I believe in years past we have reimbursed relocation expenses. So if you are like we've worked with OTRCH in the past, and they've had to relocate a bunch of folks. I want to say that we reimburse the relocation costs for their residents. So no, somebody cannot be in the home when the work is going on. And what happens after that? When the work is completed, we'll do a test, and then we have to wait 24 hours to once it's clear to get the person back in. So if the contractor does a really good job and cleans really well and did awesome and they pass, great. But if they come in, they test, and they find that there's still some stuff that needs to be done, then that person's out of their home. So like I said, we have a really good pool of contractors that we work with, and the bar is set pretty high because we want to avoid that inconvenience for folks.
What's the turnaround time? Like, say if I apply for funds, how long does it usually take before you know?
Okay. In the past, I want to say that from start to finish, I want to say that 2 months is probably a safe bet from the time an inspection is scheduled until maybe from the time the inspection is scheduled until work is scheduled, 2 months or less.
And are you open to applications anywhere from acquisition to we were just tearing the walls off and we found lead paint and we stopped and then go apply for this money? Or does it need to be early?
I would say the earlier the better, but either way, either way, I think that if you come to us, then we'll do the inspection and we'll just go through the process. So I don't think that will necessarily preclude you from using this for property. But I mean, don't gut it and then come to us and say, hey, we need lead grant funds to put it back together, because that's not going to work. So, yeah.
Is only CDCs or other organizations eligible, or can individuals?
So the way that we have it structured is that we work with individual property owners and then CDCs.
Is that income based for individuals?
Yeah. So they've got to be at that 80% AMI max.
any deadlines right now, or is it just rolling application?
It's a rolling application, and I would just encourage you guys to check the Choose City and the Cincinnati website, just because once it's live, then we'll go live with that. Now, we're already starting to get a lot of calls and applications, so because the need is there. But I'm actually glad that we're doing this now, so that CDCs can prepare, in consequence, to make sure that if they've got rehabs that are going on, that they can come to us and make sure to secure the funding that they need.
Yeah, we wanted to get ahead of the curve
Yeah.
on that and get this information out. What is your timing where you think you might be ready?
I think it's any month now. The reason that the normal lead grant folks are not here right now is because they're actually at a lead grant training. So this is like the it's like the Kentucky Derby, like all the horses are lined up and they just haven't gotten out the gate yet. So I'm singing my own Kentucky home right now. Like we're gonna get there. But I want to say that it's in the next month that we should be hitting the ground running. So
I know you're not sure about lead pipes are really concerned. Weston is happy.
right.
So I know this year you're not necessarily sure about it, but for the following year's funding, is that going to be a priority for you all? To see that in the grant applications now?
I do know that when we were in talks with HUD, that was one of the things that we had mentioned. So, like I said, the day-to-day folks can probably answer that much better than I can. I'm more on the development side, but I will make sure, like I said, to communicate that with Denise.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, thank you.
Every house
You
has
said, is it HUD's requirement or only 10% of the basic?
Exactly.
Those units would be sold to low-income households.
Right, but if they're sold to low-income households with children under the age of 6, which is our target, then it wouldn't count as a vacant
It
unit.
wouldn't.
Right. But the goal is just to be under that 10%. But at the same time, the lawyers that were just here, we don't want you guys to build a house and then just say, hey, only people with children under the age of 6 can live here, because that would probably be breaking a bunch of fair housing laws and all that. And we don't obviously want you guys to do that. So.
Very good. That's a lot of information.
It is.